good evening everybody. Today is the 4th of February 2014 and we're going to be learning this evening a little bit about what the ancestors in Beersheva or Beersheva in the Bible was like. We're going to look at the Chumash stories from our Torah and a couple of the books of the prophets. We're going to see who lived in this area and what they did there. And we're going to separate some of the Bubamaises out, some of the kind of fanciful stories you may or may not know from reality. And we're going to work, as we always do in these classes, from two things, from text and from archaeology. So it has to either be proven as a matter of text or proven as a matter of rocks. And sometimes the text and the rocks don't exactly match up. And when that happens, we are grateful for the opportunity to try and figure it out, or to leave the conundrum unsolved until Elijah the prophet comes and resolves all puzzles in the coming of the end of days. Okay, so my name's Tobin, and I'm the rabbi here at B'nai Shalom. This is also an advanced class for those who want to come on the Israel trip, which will be flying this July. There's information on that over there on the counter. The bottom line is it's 10 days, and it's mostly to the south. I'm going to show you on our map here where we will be going on the trip, and then we're going to dive in because much of the trip is related to tonight's class. We will land here in Tel Aviv, outside of Tel Aviv at Ben Gurion Airport, and we will make the Aliyah to Jerusalem, and we're going to spend several days there. Then we will come down near Jericho and to Masada and to the Ein Gedi 5-star resort there. Ooh, no, I'm not bleeding, but my pen has seen better days. Pardon me? Need a tissue? Yeah. My goodness. Okay. Well, I'll be okay. It's just a flesh wound. The Monty Python fans on the internet won't enjoy that one. Okay, so let's try. Now I'm afraid to use the same company, but we'll try it. Try black. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. Most of what's left in Jerusalem as far as archaeology is in two eras. The medieval to modern era or the biblical era, meaning the kingdom of Solomon and David and Hezekiah in those times. We've got some really neat archaeology we're going to see there, but we covered that really in the last class. Down in Masada and Ein Gedi, we're going to have a 5-star resort. And then over in this area, there's a town that's not on this map. It's actually a city, and it's called Arad. And we're going to come through the desert to Arad. We're going to spend Shabbat there at our sister community. And we're going to learn a little bit about Arad this evening as well. And from Arad, we are going to go here and then do a little Jeep tour thingy and get to see what the real geography is in this area. And we're going to go to a place called Wadi Atir, right near the Camel, which is a ecological education center that's being built with funds by the JNF and others. And it engages Bedouins and non-Arab Israelis in an educational center for organic growth and sustainable growth. It's an animal center, it's a planting center, and it's really neat. And we're going to learn about water harvesting and water resources in the south. Then we're going to go to Beersheva. The subject of our lecture is really centered on Beersheva tonight. We're going to come all the way down here to this corner, and we're going to see what it's like to be in Israel proper in sight of Egypt and Gaza. And we're going to come up here to Sderot, which is a town here with an indoor playground. And then we're going to come up to Tel Aviv for a couple of days in the big city, and then home to West Orange. So we're going to center now on this part of the country down here. We're going to try and understand it biblically, because this is a part of the country in modern times as well as biblical imagination that really gets often overlooked, but it's integral. If you're going to have an opinion about Israel and the legitimacy of Israel, or Jews and the legitimacy of our connection with the land of Israel, in any way, left, right, or center, pro or con, if you're going to have an opinion, you have to understand the complexity of this land's history. You can't start in 1948 or 1973 or the late 1800s and think that you've got a reasonable picture of this land and its history and its people. So since this is a synagogue and this is a Jewish group that we're studying with tonight, we are going to go back to the earliest origins of Jewish history in the land and acknowledge, first of all, that the land of Israel was not started as the land of Israel. We know that. The first people to live in the land of Israel were not Jews. Jews doesn't even apply to the religion of the Israelites, really, for at least 1,000 years. So we're going to try and understand some of that complexity. So let's go back. We talked about Jerusalem last time, and we remembered that Jerusalem and the areas around Jerusalem actually have some archaeology, some little statues and things that have been found from actually late Stone Age times. That may have been a startling thing. It raised a few eyebrows in the room. Following the Stone Age is which age? The Bronze Age. Very good. And following the Bronze Age is the Iron Age. Very good. Okay, so this part of the world was much more temperate after the cooling of the glaciers. The last glaciers up in Europe and North America were melting, around the year 10,000 or 15,000 before the Common Era. By 10,000, the last major ice age was coming to a close. And so we see civilization in Mesopotamia, these areas really having 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years of development, language, specialization of labor, building of cities, the growth of religions, priestly structures, political maneuvers, empires on the rise. That can't happen in an ice age. That doesn't happen in a time of famine. But after a couple of 1,000 years of things getting nicer and warmer, it goes pretty well. And that's what happened in this area.
With the occasional war thrown in.
Lots of wars thrown in. There's nothing like economic resources being available, but not evenly distributed to spur conflict. And we'll talk about some of the wars that affect this area as well. So if we're going to center down here in Beersheva and Arad, you can already see from the coloring of this map that there are three dominant colors on the map. What colors do you see? Green, blue, and yellow. Which color are we dealing with?
Yellow.
Mostly yellow. That means that it's not green and it's not blue. There's not the kind of rolling fields that you have up in the Galilee. There's parts of the Galilee that look like Ireland in the springtime and summer. I mean, just unbelievable green rolling hills next to creeks and rivers, and it's crazy. That's not down here. Down here is a lot of rocks and a lot of sand, and it was that way always. So, yes?
There was this theory that the whole Negev was blooming, and because you didn't take care of the land wasn't protected, and through erosion it became desert.
Yes, the archaeology doesn't show a fossil record of lots of plants in this area, though. So it's a theory, and I can't disprove it because I wasn't there, but there's not a fossil record of a temperate zone in this area.
I think that was Ben-Gurion.
Well, Ben-Gurion was a romantic, right? And that's very nice. And the truth is, if you pay attention to the land down here, you can make it blossom, because if you go back before the Ice Age, and you get to earlier periods of time, sure, this was a blossoming area. This was a runoff area. This was a river that connected from here all the way down to Eilat. That's why that valley is there. There's a time in the history when this Rift Valley was all water all the way down. But it's not that way, anymore. It hasn't been since before the Ice Age, for sure. In any event, Beersheva, we're going to do better on time this time. Our first human settlement in Beersheva, not surprisingly, happens along the rivers. There's a major river in Beersheva, which we'll get to go visit, and the JNF has done a beautiful cleanup of, and there's a park there, and there's a great brand new museum in the last year, so new that when I was there last July, it wasn't open yet, called the Abraham Wells Museum. And it's a story of Abraham and Sarah and what happened in Beersheva. Basically, a lot of this class only with the archaeology of a museum, right there by the river. And they found along this river, from the early Bronze Age, there's a special term, the Chalcolithic Age, which is actually the Copper Age, before they learned to smelt copper with tin to create bronze, which is a harder metal, and you can make weapons and armor out of it, as well as tools. They used copper. Copper is found throughout the Negev as a naturally occurring mineral that you don't need to actually get it out of other things. You dig it up, you put it in a pot, it melts into copper. It's not hard. So this is a major economic producer of copper in the Copper Age, okay, which is before the Bronze Age. So anyone have a guess when the Copper Age is in this part of the world?
3,500
It's not a bad guess. You guessed 3,500. It's a range. 5,000 is probably wrong, and 3,000 would be the latest date. So 5,000 to 3,000 BCE is the Copper Age. We have human beings in Beersheva. The way they live is they dig holes in the ground, and then they tunnel in like hobbits, if you're a Tolkien fan, and they connect their little rooms underground to each other, and you have these common areas where the holes come out into these larger pits near the rivers, and in the desert that makes a lot of sense. You're near the water, you have protection from the elements, you have protection from animals, and you can build a community, and it's cooler underground. And so it was actually right where you'd expect to find them, and they have good early Bronze Age archaeology that we're not going to see because we have a limited time that's in that area. When was, let's say, Abraham? Let's say Abraham is a real person walking around like God tells him to. And if you don't like that theory, then certainly there were people like him. When was there a time when there was Abraham or people like Abraham? If you had to pick a time.
Second millennium.
Second millennium, meaning the 1000s. An early date for Abraham would be 1800. A late date for Abraham would be 1400. Something like that. We're going to call that Abe and Sarah. And that's going to kind of bring us into our first texts, because once we get to Abraham and Sarah, we're into the Chumash. So hopefully you all have a red book in front of you. And I would like you to turn to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. The goal is, who lived in Beersheva, what did they do, and what do we know about it? And why was it important, or was it important, for our identity as Jews? And what's the cool stuff we're going to see when we go? So, Genesis 12. Someone shout out a page number.
69? Okay.
No, 70.
Oh, right.
Genesis 12. 69 is correct.
Here.
69 is correct. Give the lady a chupidah. All right. This is Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladecha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher arecha ve'aseh lecha goy gadol ve'avarecha. This is the command to Abraham: get thee out of thy house, thy father's house, the land of your birth, and go to the country that I will show you. There are many theories about where Ur of the Chaldees is, Ur HaKasdim. For a long time, it was thought to be somewhere near the border between Iraq and Kuwait. I don't subscribe to that theory. I think that it is actually the Aramean Kasdim, and it's up around Haran at the headwaters of the Tigris and the Euphrates, which would make it northwestern Syria. Makes a heck of a lot more sense given the archaeology and the history, and also the word Kasdim is used in later texts for that area. So, in any event, he's not from here, okay? Whether he's in Kuwait and he has to walk up the river system and come down, or he started here and he has to come down, doesn't much matter for our purposes. He's not born here. He's not in Beersheba. And for those of you at home who can't see because you're so far away, here is Beersheba in the land of Israel. Okay, so God goes to Avram and he says, take a walk, right? Get moving. And what does he say? He says, I will make you a great nation, and people will bless you, etc. And then Lot went with him, and Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran, which is definitely up here in the mountains. And Avram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the wealth they had amassed, so he's not a poor guy going out on this journey, he's not a beggar, and all the wealth they amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, they had servants, and they set out for the land of Canaan, or Canaan. This is the land of Canaan. The coast is the land of the Plishtim, and they're a mix of people and cultures who are doing economic trade into the Mediterranean. Not really as domestic as the Canaanites, who are in the hill country in this area. Moabites are over here, Canaanites are here. He's coming down from Aramea, up here in Haran, and he's coming down. He brings his family with him and a fair amount of wealth. When they arrived in the land of Canaan, Avram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem. So he's coming dot, 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 Shechem is currently in the Palestinian Authority and it has the modern name Nablus. The city of Nablus is the biblical city of Shechem. It has Hara Grizim and Hara Eval, and there's ancient archaeology there that we haven't gotten to dig under because, of course, people live there. And that would be a really bad idea. No matter how curious I would be to know what the archaeology is under that city. In any event, he gets to Nablus, he gets to Shechem. At the Terebinth of Moreh, and the Canaanites were in the land. In other words, it's a populated land. Is our Torah trying to tell us that this was an empty land?
No.
No, our Torah is being very clear. This is not an empty land. This is a well-settled land with people who have names and cities and kings. This is a well-established land. He comes from the breadbasket of the world with wealth. And he comes on the journey to a developed country. Okay? No, we have no problem with this. This is the truth of the timeline. Okay, so then what happens? God appears to Avram, and he says, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he built an altar there. I'm on page 72 in the 8th kind. This is Genesis 12:8. From there he moved to the hill country east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent. He comes down this way, right? He's coming down the hill country. And he pitches his tent. So what do we learn about how he lived? He lived in tents as a nomad. How did he move all of this great wealth he had with him? Possibly camels. Camels were definitely domesticated in the Bronze Age. He would not have had a horse. Horses were not domesticated in this area of the Bronze Age. They didn't have shoes to put on them anyways because bronze shoes don't work on a horse. They're too heavy. Right? They crush the metal. It doesn't do anything. We have a veterinarian, right? Wouldn't do much good, would it? You need iron. Okay, very good. All right, so he goes to the hill country east of Bethel. He pitches his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to God, and he called to God by name. And then Abram journeyed by stages towards the Negev. By stages.
He took stagecoaches.
He did not take a stagecoach. Okay? So he heads towards the Negev. Notice he does a bypass on what's eventually going to become a very important area in Hebron. But he's going on stages. He doesn't know where he's going. God keeps saying, I'll give you the land and I'll bless you. He sees him again here, I'll give you the land and I'll bless you. God doesn't say stop. It's like Simon says. God said start walking. He's walking until God says stop. So God doesn't say stop. So he goes right past this whole area and he's heading down here to the Negev. And here you see the word on the map, Negev. That's the name for this entire region, which is about 45% of the land of Israel in the modern map. There's famine in the land. So where does Avram go from there? He goes to Egypt. Okay? Now Egypt probably had control of this whole area, so he probably doesn't have to go all the way over here to the Nile Delta to be in Egypt. This is probably Egypt. Yeah? Okay? And this is Plishtim. So we know that very soon after this, the Egyptians build a city called Soar in this area that becomes quoted in much of the literature as a major Egyptian stronghold. It's their frontier post. So we know that Egypt is in influence in this area. He may have gone farther down, but he's not like in the Valley of the Kings and stuff like that. Don't mistake it. Okay, so what has he done? Abraham has arrived. All right? He goes, as far as he goes to Egypt, he has a little interesting dalliance in Egypt that we don't need to talk about. It's not the subject of the class. Suffice it to say, he and Sarah come out unscathed and with even more wealth. And they're going to return now to the land of Israel. Turn to chapter 13. Chapter 13. Page 74. From Egypt, Abram went up into the Negev. He went up into the Negev. Okay? And where does he go? With his wife and all that he possessed, together with Lot. And Abram was now very rich in cattle and silver and gold. And he proceeded again in stages from the Negev as far as Bethel, where he had been formerly, between Bethel and Ai, and the site of the altar he built there at first. And there Abraham prays to God again, basically trying to say, what the heck is going on? Give you some direction here. Yeah. So Bethel, if you look in the back of the map, actually I have maps. In the back of your packet, you'll see a map. Did I give you maps? Mm-hmm. Yes, you'll see Abraham, the map that says page 26. Okay? Bethel is around here. North of Salem, which is ultimately becomes Jerusalem, north of Shalem. Bethel is here. Okay? Ai is a very important city, a little to the north of that, and to the other side of the trail, because Ai is the first city that they conquer when they come through Jericho to settle the land under Joshua. The first battles take place at Ai. And they found pottery in the hills and stuff there that was clearly an ancient settlement. Again, not an area we can do a lot of archaeology these days. Okay, so he comes back to here. So this is the Ark of Abraham here. This is his travel journey. Okay?
That's a dumb question.
Yeah.
He went down because it was a famine, right?
Yes.
And so quickly he got food and got a lot of another stuff and he got back.
Well, there's two ways to solve a famine. One is to grow food, and the other is to buy food. He's now tremendously wealthy. He's come back from Egypt tremendously wealthy. Okay, so we also presume the famine has ended, but we don't know because it doesn't seem he was down there very long. A couple of nights, the king has a scary dream, and they're back on the road again.
How did he get so wealthy?
The king gave him a bribe, basically. Go away in peace and don't cry out to God against me because your God said he's going to do really bad things to me and I believe him. So here, have a lot of cash. It's a payoff. It's a payoff. Okay, so he comes back out, and what happens next? 13:1 through 18, very quickly. And Lot, who went with Avram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And then they both have herdsmen, they have cattle. And then in verse 7, the Canaanites and the Perizzites are dwelling in the land. Verse 8, Avram says to Lot, let there be no difference between us. If you go south, I'll go north. If you go north, I'll go south. You pick, and I'll take the other. Lot looks around him, and he saw how well watered. So they're standing here, and Lot's looking at the map, and what color is he going to pick?
Green.
Green and blue. So what does he pick? Everything north of that. So Avram turns around and heads back this way. Okay? So that's that story. If you go south, I'll go north. He looked about him and he saw how well watered the Jordan was. This is before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Dun, dun, dun. A little foreshadowing there. All the way to Zoar, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Okay. Now, Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan. Avram remained in the land of Canaan. Lot settled in the plains. And the inhabitants of Sodom were very wicked sinners, and that's a whole other story. The Lord says to Avram that Lot had parted from him, and he says, raise your eyes and look. So now he says, look. He's here. He says, look to the north, and the south, and the east, and the west. I'm going to give it all to you anyways. All right? So that's what he gets from God after he makes his deal with Lot. Okay? I'll give the land to you and to your offspring, and I'll make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that no one can count the dust of the earth, and your offspring too cannot be counted. Up, walk about the land, which is the theme of the trip. Up, walk about the land, through its length and its breadth, for I give it to you. And Avram moved his tent, and he came to dwell at the terebinths of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built there an altar. So now he comes back to Hebron. And this is where Abraham really settles for quite a bit. Okay? So that's chapter 13. Now, there's a few things that happen that we don't need to know about. He has an allegiance with a bunch of kings, and then there's a bunch of wars. Hagar shows up. Hagar is brought into the family. He has Ishmael, who is his firstborn son by the maidservant Hagar. And he's in Mamre, which is near Hebron. The angels come and visit him, and Sarah laughs, and they say, you're going to have a kid, etc. And Lot and Zoar and the daughters of Lot, and all that happens, right, with the unseemly business, and his wife looks back and is turned into salt, and you know all that stuff. Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed. Now, move to Genesis chapter 20. Genesis chapter 20. Moving along. Where is Abraham at this point? In Hebron. He's in Hebron. And everyone's alive and well, though a few people have been kicked out of the house by now.
109.
Okay, page 109. Bottom of the page, last sentence. Abraham journeyed. Why? No reason is given. It's not famine, and it's not exactly clear what the motivation is. But he goes towards the Negev, and he settles between Kadesh and Shur. And if you look at your maps, you will see that Kadesh and Shur are not on that particular map. But they're not far from Gerar. Okay? They're not far from Gerar, which is on the map. So you see Gerar is to the left, northwest of Beersheba, right around here. I'll put a G. Gerar is in that area. Okay? This is where the king Abimelech is. So King Abimelech is there. And much like Abraham and Pharaoh had an incident with Abraham and Sarah had an incident with Pharaoh in Egypt, the incident seems to repeat itself in most of its details here with Abimelech and Gerar, with much the same outcome, where Abraham is going to have to leave Gerar. But there's another detail of what happens in Gerar that you need to pay attention to, and that is where we start to see the question of how is Abraham living? How does he live? Is it just cattle? Is this just an animal ecology, and they're nomadic farmers of animals, and they're living off of the milk and things like that? Or is he going to try and be stable and stay in one place? Well, if you're going to be stable in the yellow part of the map, what do you need?
Water.
You need water, more than anything else. And you need water that will not dry up, which is more likely in this area to be a well than a river, because the rivers around here are seasonal. They're wadis. In the rainy season, they run, and the rest of the time, they're dry. And it's not really going to help you and your cattle to be sitting next to a dry riverbed half of the year. That doesn't work. So, they're going to dig wells. There's conflicts over the wells with the people in Abimelech's kingdom, and then eventually they have a little agreement, and Abraham goes on his way. Where do we go? Well, in Genesis 21, we see Beersheba for the first time. Please go to 21, verse 22. In the meantime, since last we met,
116.
Isaac has been born, the jealousy has happened, Sarah is saying get rid of Hagar. All of that is starting to happen. And now in 116, verse 22, at that time, Abimelech and Pichol, chief of his troops, said to Abraham, Abraham has now made a deal with the people who live in this area. Right? That they're not going to have war in that area. And then from there, we have the Akedah. If you look at chapter 22, the binding of Isaac, which we're not going into. There's arguments over whether the binding of Isaac happens here or here. Doesn't matter. What matters is where it starts and where it ends. Do we know where it starts? Don't know. It's somewhere down here around Gerar. That's the last we heard. All we know is God says one morning, wake up and go kill your son.
So what concept of the Evan Shiam with the Midrash?
You're in the Midrash, right. You're in the Midrash. Okay? What we do know is that the place that he is going to is called Moriah, or Moriah, and there's a strong connection of Moriah and the prophets to Jerusalem, and the rock on the Temple Mount. Could very well be. Or it could be down here. Or some people say Sinai in the Midrash. The Midrash doesn't give us an archaeological proof. For our purposes on this thing, trying to understand Beersheba, this is where Abraham is living when he's told to sacrifice Isaac, and he has to take Isaac somewhere else to do it. What I want to point out is what happens at the end. Abraham is now past the test, and if you look on page 121, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time and said, by myself I swear, because you have done this, you have not withheld your son, I will bless you, this time not like dust in the earth, but stars in the heaven. Right? And then all the nations, verse 18, of the earth will bless themselves by your descendants, because you obeyed my command. 19, Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed together for Beersheba. And they stayed in Beersheba. Who's not in Beersheba? Sarah. There's no evidence that Sarah was ever in Beersheba.
Where did we leave the last?
Last we saw, she was mentioned around this area, Mamre. Or then he came down towards the Negev, right? And then the angels came, but Lot was up here. So she's in this region, which makes sense because the next Parsha Chayesara, she dies, she's in Hebron. And Abraham has to go there, it says. He leaves Beersheba and goes to Hebron and talks to Elon, and he buys the cave of Machpelah, and he buries her there. So they're separated at the end of their life, evidently. He's living in Beersheba, and she's living in Hebron.
Oh, and you always try to kill her there.
It's not the only reason to separate, but it may be one of the best. But he gets the kids, so that doesn't make as much sense, because the kid's with him. Okay, let's move on. So the Akedah ends with Beersheva. What's very interesting is that living in Beersheva seems to be the outcome of the Akedah. So what status does Beersheva have from the Torah's point of view? Is it like some forlorn outpost of no import? Or does it have some meaning and some value?
It's his reward.
It's his reward. It's the site where the blessings begin. It's his first permanent dwelling place when God says, I will make you like the stars of heaven. You have passed my final test, and your reward is you get to live in Beersheva. That's the reward. He doesn't send him to Jerusalem. He doesn't send him to the Jordan. He doesn't send him to Hebron. He settles him in Beersheva. This is, from this moment forward, this is always and forever the integral southern end of the land of Israel. The land of Israel will always include Beersheva in every prophet, in every map, in every allusion, now, on, and forever. They talk about it as being from Dan to Beersheva. That's the description of Israel in the prophets and the kings from now on. That it goes from the tribe of Dan to the town of Beersheva. It doesn't say from Dan to Simeon, which is the tribe that gets this area, Shimon. It says from Dan to Beersheva, breaking that mold of naming things by the areas of the tribes. Again, pointing out the importance of this particular place to dwell. Okay? Very important. Okay, so that's the history of Beersheva. What's interesting now, if you turn to Genesis 24:61, 24:61, we're going to move forward. Sarah, Alea Shalom, has died. And Isaac needs a wife. Abraham has remarried. Evidently still living in Beersheva. Maybe Hebron. And who's got a page for me?
138.
Page 138. Please read for me verses 61 to 62. Go ahead.
Then Rebekah and her maids arose, mounted the camels, and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of the high road, for he was settled in the region of the Negev. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebekah saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself.
Okay, we can stop there. It's a lovely little romantic interlude, but I'm not in a romantic mood. So what we have here, to clean this up just a little bit, let's clean off the middle. Okay? And down here in the south, we have Beersheva, and we have Hebron, where Sarah was buried, and Abraham was here, but Isaac was in an area called Beher Lahai-Roi. That's down in this area. Why? Because Isaac also has a dalliance down to Egypt, and he also has conflicts with these guys building wells in Gerar. He repeats all of this in his own stories, the same thing Abraham did. So Isaac's little triangle is from here to here to here. That's where he's living his life. That's where Isaac lives. Isaac is not a Jerusalem guy. Isaac is not a Galil or a Shechem guy, and he's certainly not a Haran guy. So Abraham's way down here, and he says, where's he going to find anyone to marry? So he sends his servant to get the woman and bring her back. It's a long journey. So he brings her back, and as he brings her back somewhere around here, he's coming back from Beher Lahai-Roi, and this is where they meet. So that image of her coming down off the camel and seeing him across the fields and veiling herself, and he sees her, and then he goes into his mother Sarah's tent with her, and they become man and wife, and he is comforted for the loss of his mother. That whole beautiful romantic story is in the kind of picturesque pastoral scenes of these desert hills down here around Beersheba.
Except that Sarah is not there.
Sarah's gone. He's still got Sarah's tent,
Okay.
right? Property, and he goes in and he starts a new family there.
So
It's like moving into mom and dad's house after they're gone.
So when you say his mother's tent, even though he owns it now, he still refers to it
It's
as...
not his mother's tent. We do that. I drove my grandfather's car for years after he was gone. It was my grandfather's car. He said, you know, I never said, there's my car. I have to go get grandpa's car. I don't know. It's just, we do that. We hang on. Okay, so that's Isaac. All right, now let's jump a little. All right. After that, by the way, Jacob has nothing to do with this area. Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, vayelech Harana. He's got the conflict with his brother about the firstborn and all of that, and he flees from here, and he's gone for the rest of the story. They don't meet back here again. That's the end of it. So this is an Abraham, Yitzchak locale. Jacob moves to the north. And when he comes back through this way, and they have all their little reunions and everything here, and Joseph and all those, they're up in this area, they're down to Hebron, in this area, they're not Beersheva anymore. So Beersheva is really taken off of the patriarchal map after Jacob flees from Esau. Okay? Now, a couple other places this area shows up. And this is where we're going to get into, I'm going to show you the pictures of the archaeology, and then I'll probably honor closer or later my promise to end at 8 o'clock. The next time that we see this is Moses. Moses, children of Israel, Egypt, Pharaoh, 10 plagues, part of the Red Sea, come through, Sinai, lots of laws, wander up. Next thing, go to the land of Israel. Got it? What year are we? 1200 is a good year. More or less. That's Moses. Okay? Look at your map. The map in the back of your package. The map right behind the page with the Abraham map. Oh, you see the Jacob map, sorry. Move one more. The last map in your package. And you'll see that a rod has made it onto the map. The last map in the package. It says, the travels of the spies and the limits of the land of Canaan. And the text is the Battle of Arad in the early 13th century before the Common Era. Someone turn to Numbers chapter 14. Arad is on the map number 50. Beersheva is not on this map, that's correct. Beersheva is not on this map because it doesn't come into this particular story. It's probably there, but they don't go through it. Okay, because this desert is open. You can come at it from any direction. It's not like up here where you're going along specific traveling routes in the hills. This is open land. So they don't go through Beersheva when they come to the land of Israel. So Moses is leading the children of Israel out. Let's turn quickly to Numbers chapter 14.
844.
Thank you. 844. Could you please read verses 44 and 45? Chapter 14, verse 44.
There, page 29.
Does that not work?
Yes, the final page on 44.
Does that not work? Is there not a
It's the
44?
last verse, 44 is the last verse.
Last verse.
It's 849.
849, the
849,
last.
go ahead.
Yes, the final.
Yet defiantly they marched towards the crest of the hill country, though neither the Lord's ark of the covenant nor Moses stirred from the camp.
Okay, does anyone know what the story is? The children of Israel are defiantly marching towards the hill country, though the Lord's ark and Moses are not with them. What story is this? This is the tragic end of the story of the spies. The spies scouted out the land of Israel. They came back. They said scary stuff. People said, we're not going there. Woe is us. Joshua and Caleb say, let's go anyways. Believe in God. The people weep. They don't believe. God gets very angry and says, this whole generation has to die out in the wilderness before I'll let my people come into the land of Israel. And they get so upset about the consequence. What do? Just like what your kid does. Make your room or you're going to lose your electronics for the night. I won't make my room. Give me your electronics. Okay, I'll make my room. Too late. Consequence has been declared. The consequence is not taken back. And so, look, I'm making my room, right? What if you say don't make your room at that point, and they keep making their room? Right? Yeah, well, it's not reverse psychology. There's going to be a second consequence. God says, consequence, you can't go in the land of Israel now. I changed my mind, it's not you. And what do? They start to go. So now what's going to happen? It's called the Battle of Arad. And it doesn't go well. The Battle of Arad. So they go up to the hill country and they're going to walk in. And they're coming in here. So what are they going to hit? They're going to hit Arad. They're in this area. They're in the eastern Negev. They come up, the first major king they're going to hit is the king in Arad, which also has been around since the Copper Age. Okay. So we have a king of Arad. Look at Numbers chapter 21, verse 1 to 3. When the Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the Negev, learned that Israel was coming by way of the Atarim, he engaged Israel in battle and took some of them captive. And Israel made a vow to the Lord and said, if you deliver this people into our hand, we will prescribe their towns. The Lord heeded Israel's plea and delivered up the Canaanites, and they fled from their cities as they were prescribed. Later on, they're in this area, they're going to bump up against this guy again. But in the story of the spies, they try and go in, and they get defeated. They get routed. It's a very bad situation. So this Arad is an outpost of the Canaanites at this time, against the Israelites making it into the land, either when they're supposed to or when they're not supposed to. Okay? So that's Arad. Now we're going to look very quickly. You know what? I don't even have to do it. In the book of Joshua, of course, we see that Arad and Beersheva are both conquered. They're taken over by the tribe of Simeon. And in Judges, we're told that in Arad, the Kenites settled there. The Kenites are not an Israelite tribe. And it's very interesting that in the book of Judges, the Kenites are living in this area. So Arad, even though it's out in the middle of the desert, seems to, by the end of the Mosaic era, and by the era of Judges, just pre-kingship, we see that this area is not Israelite settled really. It's cosmopolitan in the sense there's different kinds of people and nationalities living in that area, and yet there are trade routes going through, and we know they're sitting on top of one of the most important natural resources in the land of Israel, copper, as well as phosphates and some other things that they use for soaps and so forth from this area. So it's a very interesting kind of close to that patriarchal period. During the time of kings, you have the archaeology that's in your package. So let's look at some pictures. Let's have some fun.
What happened to Shiloh and the Ark?
What's that?
The Ark and Shiloh, that's what the Ark.
The Ark in Shiloh is King David. So, well, during the time of Judges, the Ark is up there. Right, King David is the one who moves it from Shiloh. So, okay, so the period of Judges, you're asking for a time. The period of Judges, 1000 is Solomon. Okay, so 1000 is the kingdom. That's when the kings take over. So the Ark is in Shiloh in this period of time, after it gets carried around in some of the battles. So from 1200 to 1000, the Ark is not in Jerusalem. And Solomon, David's son, you know, certainly in the high 900s, by 950, you've got the capitals in Jerusalem with the temple and all that kind of stuff.
But this is up north, not in the negative.
Right. The Ark was only with the children of Israel when they were coming from Sinai to the land. As they traveled their 40 years of wandering, I read it too quick, one of the little wars they have is against the guy in Arad.
I just came back from Shiloh. I was in Shiloh, I'm sorry.
It's a different time period.
The Ark in Shiloh, that's
Yes.
in Shiloh is from a different church.
Yes. Yeah, this is Moses and the children of Israel. Nobody's made it to Shiloh yet. In what the story I was just reading, okay? We're not there yet. Then they settle the land, and that happens in Joshua and Judges, and then by the kingship, Jerusalem becomes the center place for the Ark. Okay, places that we've mentioned, that we may have a chance to see. We're going to just look at them, I'm going to point them out to you, and I hope you'll enjoy them, because we don't have time to read through them all. Tel Grar is the mysterious Tel. It really has not been very well excavated yet, and I hope someday somebody will, you know, give $1 million to some biblical institute to do a full excavation of Tel Grar. Because even though this isn't a place where Israelites lived, it was King Avimelech, it was Phicol, it was his servants. It's a place of great activity during the patriarchal time, and we can learn a lot about what it meant to live in this area by going through Grar. I was in the Tel with a group once, and we were in the rubbish area where you're allowed to do some digging, and there's very thick pottery from like large water containers and things like that. It's also on a little kind of oasis river and swampy area that always stays wet. So it makes sense that that is an area that they would have been digging. Tel Grar is something that if we can, I'm going to try and make a side trip with a trip, but no promises. Turn a few pages. You're seeing the images of what, the land is like. Now, Tel Arad, city in the Negev. Outside of Arad, there is a city from the Iron Age, and even from the Bronze Age. And this is a site we are going to see. Now, like Masada, most of these biblical sites, when you visit them, what you find is you find rubble wall foundations that are about as high as your ankle, maybe as high as your knee if you're lucky, and a lot of stones lying all over the place. And the Antiquities Authority realized pretty soon they don't want to just clean up and get the dirt out, but there's tourism involved here, and you want to make it look more realistic. So what they do is they take all the rocks in the area, which probably were parts of the buildings, and they build up the walls. In most of these places, they'll draw a black line across the wall, which you'll see on Masada, all the way on the top of Masada, black lines on the walls. Everything below the line was original archaeology as they discovered it, and everything above the line has been rebuilt to show you what it looked like from these materials. That's fair. I think it's good science, good archaeology. We're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. Tel Arad has the same thing. What's very interesting about Tel Arad, and you can move through, you'll see the Arad House, border fortress, some of these things. I want to point out one thing, and that's the Israelite temple. You'll see a page that has an Israelite temple. What's very interesting about Tel Arad, it's the only place in this part of the country, really outside of Jerusalem, where you see a temple with the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh name of God carved in the stones. So our God, that one God, the main God of the Israelite kingdom, from the earliest time of Israelite occupation, has a temple in Arad. And nobody knows really anything other than that fact. So we all get to guess about it. But they have, much of the stones and the pillars and the little altars and the service vessels and so forth are all there, and it's been rebuilt, and there's some great stuff that we will conjecture about that. Was it an Israelite temple? Was it a spin-off temple? Was that why they were so far away? Maybe they believed in our God a different way? Who knows? Then you have Tel Beersheva, which I encourage you to read at home as well. And you'll see some of the wonderful archaeology that we have around that. The point here is that these areas continued to be settled and major, not just outposts, but civilization centers through the kingdom of Israel. Sennacherib, when he destroys the northern kingdom, comes all the way down to Arad and Beersheba. And he comes this far in his conquests, even though he doesn't get Jerusalem. He gets past Jerusalem, he comes down this far. And when Nebuchadnezzar conquers Jerusalem, he comes down, he conquers Arad. With the destruction of Jerusalem in 586, much of the, what you would call Israelite settlement of Arad and Beersheba comes to a close. It turns over to the non-Israelite story for a significant period of time. It's not part of the story of Ezra and Nehemiah and the return to the land of Israel under Cyrus the Mede. And we can just presume that there's some people living around there as it deteriorates over time because we don't see new archaeology really for a long, long time. When Israel gets resettled in this area by Jews in the late 1800s, but mostly really after 1948, there's a big push down into this area by David Ben-Gurion, who lived down here in Sde Boker, and others. Ariel Sharon lives over in this area. Right here is where he lived, and that's where he's buried. A lot of these people who are founding fathers and mothers of the state of Israel saw the desert as the place that they needed to return to. And in some way, there's a parallel with modern Zionism to the original patriarchal story. That this is real Israel here. Jerusalem is always going to be a mess, I hate to say it. It's just always going to be a mess. It's a mix of stuff and people, and it's always going to be that. It's never going to be something that everyone's happy with, even though I'm moved profoundly when I'm there. It's tremendously important to us. It's tremendously important to many people. Jerusalem's a mess. Tel Aviv is Manhattan. It's a big city. I love it. It's got great stuff there, but it's a city. All these places kind of have their own characteristic. But if you want to really know what it meant to be the first generation of Israelites in relationship with God, forming a covenant, starting out new, you got to come down here. And the story that we're going to see is from the people living in this corner right here, where I talked about on Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, who were living in the Sinai, they got thrown out. They were living in Gaza, they got pulled out. And they've now settled right here in what is Israel proper. No matter what your politics are, you should be happy that this is a legitimate and good place for people to live who want to build the state of Israel.
What would it call
It's called Chalutza.
Marchalutza?
Chalutza is the name of the community, the Chalutza community. And we're going to stand right there, and we're going to see the fence to Gaza and the fence to Egypt. We can wave to the Egyptian soldiers. They're not amused. They won't wave back. Because it's hot.
Shoot.
They won't shoot. No, we have a peace treaty with Egypt. It's all good. But, you know, that's what we're going to see. And we're going to see the land. And we're going to see this archaeology. And we're going to try and understand what modern Zionism is doing and what exactly is it recreating in this area. It's a very complex area, very ancient roots, and core to our identity, to our connection with the land of Israel. And surprisingly, profoundly overlooked in general conversation about biblical Israel and our roots in the land. So I hope you'll come, and I hope you'll be on the trip, and I hope you'll see what I've seen there, which is just amazing. Thank you. Got the video because